It's my great pleasure today to be talking to the master of wine from Charles Heidsieck himself. It is Ned Goodwin. Pleasure having you in Christchurch, Ned.
Sheer pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now we're down here, we're going to be trying some of your fantastic Charles Heidsieck champagne. Now if you haven't heard about Charles Heidsieck, he's Champagne Charlie. Back in the 1800s, a lot of his business was done in New York before the American Civil War, and what happened, you could hardly write a story on it, could you?
No, he was a bit of an adventurous soul, really. I mean, he was the first champenois to take his champagne to the West by saying that he went to New York and to New Orleans principally. He partied pretty hard in upper crust social circles and, as he said, became known as Champagne Charlie.
He had a bit of a nasty experience by being thrown in jail for 7 months, and then after that he went bankrupt, and it's a real interesting story. Yep. But of course he came back and created the fantastic brand that is Charles Heidsieck.
He did, and I mean that legend is still strong. But of course Charles, in New Zealand, as with other key champagne markets, it disappeared for a number of years, and so I'm here to retell the story.
And it's great to have you back.
Yeah, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about the different variations of Charles Heidsieck that we've got here.
Well, we've got the two non-vintage wines, the Rosé and the Brut Reserve, and they are driven by an unparalleled percentage of what we call reserve wines. So reserve wines are the older wines in the blend that we blend through with the three principal grape varieties, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, Chardonnay. So what that gives Charles is a very textural, broad-shouldered, quite powerful expression of champagne, albeit Charles doesn't use oak, so it accentuates the freshness by handling the fruit very protectively, if you will, a bit wine geeky, I suppose, but otherwise known for very rich textural expressions. And then we move into the vintage wines. So by definition, the older wines or the reserve wines can't be used for the vintage wines because legally they have to be made from grapes from that particular year, the year that's on the label, of course. In here, I suppose Charles is defined by very long lees-aged, bottle-aged champagne. So we have one that's in fact been aged for 7 to 8 years,
right.
And then the Blonde Millénaire, the Prestige Cuvée on my right over here, has been aged for 15 years on lees, and that's a straight Chardonnay.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to sitting down and having a wonderful lunch with you.
I bet you are.
So tell us about what's happening with Charles Heidsieck in Asia, because of course you're the Asian representative. I mean, you spent a lot of time in Japan.
I did. I lived in Japan for 13 years, just recently moved back to Sydney, so it's been a long time between drinks, first time in fact in 24 years living there, but my responsibilities are Australia, obviously here, in New Zealand, Singapore, mainland China, and Hong Kong. Wow. And Japan, obviously. So what's happening for many, like here, it's an issue of retelling this engaging story about Champagne Charlie, who I think, given his sort of adventurous streak, his rakish nature, his sort of, hipster character, he's quite the dandy, really. So I think he's really of the zeitgeist, and that story needs to be retold.
It's a great... Hugh Grant did the movie back in '89.
He did.
If you want to go and rent it from your local store. But he's an incredible character. 6'4", I think he was, compared to the average of around then about 5'5". Very social. All of these things that happened to him, and then he ended up owning half of Denver.
Yeah, I haven't said this before. He actually looked a bit like Errol Flynn, really.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, he was very flamboyant, and I suppose my generation and beyond remember Charles Heidsieck very fondly because it was always a real wine lover champagne with all that old wine in there. I mean, no other house uses that depth, that level of reserve wine in their blends. But for, I suppose, my generation and younger, many people need to be engaged.
Be reacquainted with
so
it.
That's my role.
I was having a chat with one of the guys earlier on, and they said, look, this is just the top of the champagne range in the world.
Ah, good. Well, I think the Heidsieck moniker is sometimes misconstrued among the public because obviously there are a number of Heidsieck's. And admittedly, while they all came from the same founder back in the 1700s, thereafter, once Charles was found, they had nothing to do with each other. And so, there is Charles and there is the others. But, I mean, Charles definitely with that reserve wine driving, the non-vintages, the long lees aging with the vintage wines. Also, important point, smallest production of any Grand Marque champagne house now.
Fantastic.
So yes,
so we're looking
quality.
at a premium quality brand that is exclusive, that if you're having a function and you need something really special to accentuate that moment, what are you going to choose?
Charles.
Charles.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, and it was a pleasure catching up with you, Ned.
Sheer pleasure. Thank you.
And we can sit down and have a wee beverage or two. Don't forget, if you're going to check out the best in Champagne, and it is going to be Charles Heidsieck.